Okay, racers, this is our first team time trial of the season, and it is on Douce, France. So we start out, this is the reverse of RGV. We start out and we do the little hills, then we have the weird bouncy stuff up and over the aqueduct, and then it's mostly flat all the way home, 24.4 kilometers, a total of just 105 meters climbing. Let's start, as we always do, with the race on a page. So I told you some of the bits and pieces here when we looked at the map. But one important thing, there are power-ups on this team time trial, which is kind of unusual, but not completely unheard of. So let's just take the sections one at a time. How many laps are there? All teams are doing one lap, no variance depending on your category. So that's 24.4 kilometers with 108 meters of climbing. How do you score points? Well, you score points because the team that finishes, you score points using the team finishing position. So basically, it's just in reverse order. Fastest gets most points, and that's pretty much it. The three power-ups you're going to see are the draft van, improve your draft effect for 30 seconds. The aero helmet increases your aero by 15 seconds, or for 15 seconds I should say, and the feather become 10% lighter for 15 seconds. Bike choice, it is not as flat as it looks because of those undulations, but essentially this is an aero route, so pick your slipperiest bike. Let's just stop for a second and talk a little about that section in orange. Formation and staying together is the order of the day for a team time trial. I know many of you out there race on Thursday's team time trial, and of course if you've done a ZRL or ZRL season before, you will be familiar with the format. But essentially the goal is to stay as a group at the highest speed you possibly can for the entire race. And if you drop somebody, you then make some clever decisions about whether you're going to hold on for them or you are going to go on without them, based on essentially exactly how gassed they are. But let's talk for a second about formation, which is what I've got in that orange box. It's really tempting to, I'm going to go in reverse order, it's really tempting to look at what pros do in a team time trial. They're in that beautiful line, the pace line. Somebody goes in, they take a turn at the front, say 30 seconds, and they'll do that at a sort of a higher watts per kilo, and then they'll drift to the back, allowing the person in number 2 spot to take their position, and this beautiful and elegant dance happens for the entire length of the team time trial. It is by far the most efficient way of running a team time trial, is to hold that pace line, but it is really hard to do. So what you mustn't do is decide you're going to do a pace line the first time you go in for a team time trial. So let's now jump to the top of my little list. What's the first rule? Well, the first rule is blob up and stay attached. Stay as a group and just stay as that blob formation. That, if you don't do anything else, is really important. It holds you together. It allows you to use each other's draft to, or rather it allows somebody to be in front and then everyone else to be drafting off that, and that is good enough. If you start to be comfortable with that, the second thing that you can do is start to stretch out that blob. So turn your sort of a big blob into more of a worm shape and stretch it out so that you've got compounding draft effect. So person a little bit back gets a compounded draft from having multiple people in front of them. So rule 1, blob up. Rule 2, stretch that blob out into a worm, and then if you can practice that enough and you can be very disciplined about how you're working things, you can evolve that into a pace line. So there you go. There are my thoughts on formation for team time trialing in the Zwift Racing League. All right, that's enough of that. Let's jump in and take a look at the DS notes. All right, here's the DS notes, and you're familiar with the format by now. What I've done here is, if you take a look at the profile view along the bottom, I've mapped out the key areas of this, and there really are only sort of 4 or 5 key things to be looking for. The first is in the initial couple of kilometers, you're going to hit 3 hills. Then after those 3 hills, when you get to 3.6 kilometers into the ride, there's 4 kilometers of just this horrendous bouncy undulating terrain. It's a bit like the S's in Watopia, but it just goes on and on and on. These will mess with your the team, because each rider will go over them at a different pace, and momentum will change versus going up versus going down. So just take care to stay together as you go over them. After that, you will pick up your first power-up, a balloon sprint. Then it's flat to the aqueduct, up and over the aqueduct, pick up another power-up. And then after the aqueduct, it's pretty much flat all the way to the end, although you will have a few undulations as you go in the second half, but you should be able to power through them. So that's a quick summary of the DS notes, and as always, I think the easiest way to consume these is to follow that link in the top right, download them free of charge, and you can distribute them to your teammates. All right, time for some shout outs. So a huge thank you to everyone on this list. We have 2 groups. One is everyone that has donated through January, and we wait for a few seconds. Here we have everybody who is in the top 10 coffee club donators of all time, my all-time heroes. So there we go. Big thanks to everyone there. All right, so if you want to help Sherpa Dave, I say this every week, so you're probably bored of it by now. What's the secret? Well, first thing is just tell your friends. Tell your friends about Sherpa Dave, particularly if they race on Zwift. Second, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Third is download the notes. I mentioned that when we were looking at the DS notes. Download the notes free of charge. And the last one is, if you really want to, and it's always greatly appreciated, buy Sherpa Dave a coffee. You can do that while you're going through the downloading the notes process, or you can actually just go straight to buymeacoffee.com/Sherpa Dave and buy that coffee. All right, target times. So this week, Douce France has been done before as a team time trial in Zwift Racing League, but it's also done relatively frequently in the Thursday team time trial. So I was lucky enough to be able to steal from there to get my inspiration for these times. So I'm just going to leave them on the screen there for a second before we jump on. Just a note, I do often try and drop the target times from the recon videos, because I feel like I'm not an expert on this, but I consistently do get the feedback back that it's really handy to have the targets, even if my targets are 10% or whatever out. So drop me a comment down below if you like the target times, or indeed if you don't like the target times. There we go. Jumping on, let's talk about recons. So last Sunday, I was lucky enough to ride RaveCon as the special guest, but they've upgraded again this week, and we'll have Anna Russell, who is with the Zwift Community Live TV show, and I think she's in New Zealand, so this will be a nighttime ride for her. So feel free to join RaveCon. They go every Sunday at noon Eastern Standard Time, which I'm pretty sure is 5 p.m. in the UK, 6 p.m. in Europe. Every weekend they do the ride, or every Sunday I should say, they do the Zwift Racing League ride as a recon, and it is a great fun ride. Lots of chat, lots of people. I will be there again this week as usual. And then the other thing is I am DSing for the Velocity Vixens, and I live stream that most weeks, so you get to see Sherpa Dave shouting at people and trying to encourage them along. But I also do my very best to commentate as I'm going along. So if you want to go at that, there's a link in the top right, so you can sign up to have a look at that live stream. Enough of all of this. I think it's time that we jump straight into the ride itself. We're on the France map in the single set of pens that are there. Out of the pens, it's 700 meters flat, so that gives you plenty of time to get into formation before we hit the route itself. So Douce France, I mentioned earlier on, it's the reverse of RGV, and I think it's a better way to do it for team time trial, because this way you get the bumpy stuff out of the way early, and then you can push as hard as your team can to finish up on the flat. After the 700 meters, we hit the three little hills. There we go, triple bumps. Bump 1 is 500 meters at 2%. It does get up to 5%. And never fear, this route does get a little bit boring as we get towards certainly the long flat at the end and a few other parts. So I will be jumping forward, and by all means you guys should jump forward to see the bits you're most interested in as you go. Alright, descent from bump 1 starts at 1.2 kilometers. Bump 2 averages 500 meters, is 500 meters, averaging 2%. Like all hills, the trick here is just to stay together. It's a team time trial, so stay together as you go. You can see it's not a steady climb. It's up to 4 or 5% and then down to 1% and then back up again. It's sort of a series of steps. The descent down from the second bump starts at 2 kilometers. Bump 3, a little milder, it's 300 meters averaging 2%. Again, it varies from 1% up to 4%, so just be paying attention and stay as a tight group. Alright, at 3.6 kilometers into the ride you hit these undulations. They are short undulations, maybe 100 meters apart. They go up or down up to 5% in some places, and they really will mess with the momentum of the team. So just as you're going up, what I do as I'm going up is put on the power a little bit and then coast a little more downhill, but every rider has to do something slightly different depending on whether they're a lighter rider or a heavier rider, and whatever works for them. But the most important thing is situational awareness. Just keep an eye on where you are. I'm going to jump forward to 6.7 kilometers into the ride because there we pass the banner just ahead of us. Alright, let's just talk about power-ups for a second then. Power-ups in a team time trial are different from power-ups in a race. In a race, you're trying to use them to gain competitive advantage. In a team time trial, of course, you are using them to try and make team advantage, which means perhaps you are using them to catch up or stay with the team if you're drifting behind or you need to take a break, or perhaps, say with the aero, you can use it to take a little turn on the front or extend your turn on the front because you'll be a little more slippery. That's particularly true of the feather. If you've got the feather, then you want to use that when we get to the aqueduct a little ways ahead, and you want to use that to lighten the load as you're going up that hill, particularly if you're weaker. But if you're stronger, then you want to use the feather to take the lead and pull everyone up the hill. So just think about the changing dynamic of what you're going to do with the power up, and make sure you do use that power up before you get to the top of the aqueduct, because that is where you will get a new one. In front of us now is Mount Ventoux, the giant of Provence. For many of you like me, Ventoux is a bit of an icon. That was the mountain that first inspired me to take up cycling. As we exit this little town, we hit right around 10 kilometers into the ride. And it's a short distance to where the aqueduct climb actually starts. Now, one thing to remember, this is a team time trial. We don't care where the KOM marker is, we care where the efforts are. So the effort starts at 10.4 kilometers into the ride, and it's not until quite a while later that the KOM marker comes into view. So this is a series of 4 to 5% short ramps, and then a little flat, and then another ramp that goes up. So there's a series of those. Altogether though, it's 800 meters and it averages 2.2%. We can see in the mini map the river that the aqueduct crosses over. So you can see right now we're on a little flat, and then it's going to bump up any second now. There it is. And actually this one takes us onto the KOM marker, or past the KOM marker. Little more of a sustained distance up. Make sure you've used the feather if you had it. Flat across the aqueduct, pick up another power up as you go under the arch. Now we get another power up in about 2 kilometers. It's actually slightly over 2 kilometers. So make sure you use the power up you just picked up on this descent, or fairly quickly on the flat that follows it. The descent is much like going up the other side of the aqueduct. It's a series of roughly 5% steps down. As we come off the hill, we're around 12 kilometers into the 24.4 kilometer ride, and it's actually mostly flat from here all the way to the end. So I'm going to do some jumping forward momentarily. The trick now we're on the flat section, is to get back in formation if you've sort of lost the discipline, and push the pace as much as you can. Changes to cobbles, and then just around this bend, or actually around the bend after it, we're going to pick up another power up, so do make sure you've used the one you had.
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you've tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day. I was down with an illusion, like a sparrow with broken wings, but now I shine with your reflection on me. I'm getting back up on my feet.
Just jump forward, because I said it's mostly flat except for a couple of areas where it isn't, so I wanted to give you an example of that. So I'm 15 kilometers into the 24.4 kilometer ride, and at 15.5-ish we get this bump up to 5% just for a short period of time, and then back down again. And there you go, that's an example. There's 3 or 4 of those as you're going through this last half. I think I can jump towards the end of the ride now. You've seen everything that you need to. This church is a good marker. It's 23 kilometers in, so you've got 1.5 kilometers left.
Pushing me up to the top. I saw the clouds looking angry, but then the sky reached my mind.
Come through the town. Here's the sprint marker. Let's accelerate the pace as a team as we go forward. And then just around this bend, we can see the end of the lap, and indeed the end of the race. Alright then, so if I don't talk to you beforehand, have a great few days before next week's ride. I'm going to leave you again with the race on the page, with the DS notes, with the target times, and a reminder of both RaveCon's Recon Ride and my live stream of DSing the Velocity Vixens. Ride on, everybody.